Welcome to ETF Market Insights, the ultimate destination for Canadian DIY investors eager for the latest on ETFs and the economy. Join us every week for timely insights and actionable strategies, all brought to you by BMO ETFs and our experienced panelists. Don't forget to subscribe, and let's jump right into today's episode.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to ETF Market Insights. I'm Erin Allen with BMO ETFs, and today we are stepping a little bit outside of our regular programming. We're going to talk about something that's becoming more and more essential in today's world, teaching kids about money. Cash seems to be disappearing in today's world. There's a lot of digital spending. It's just a tap away. So I think more than ever, it's critical for our kids to understand money. Whether it's saving for a toy, understanding the value of work, or, learning about keeping future debt down, all of these things are super important and can shape our financial futures at the end of the day. So in this episode, we're going to dive into sort of the why, when, and how of raising money smart kids. Before we do get started, just a quick reminder, we're not providing any investment advice or recommendations. Today is all about providing education. So today I have the pleasure of being joined by Maya Corbic and Clifton Corbin. Welcome, you guys. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Clifton, let's start with you. You host the Raising Generational Wealth Virtual Summit every year in the spring. And you're also a published author with your first book titled Your Kids, Their Money. It's a great read. But hoping I can turn it over to you to give yourself a quick intro, share a bit about your background and what inspired you to focus on financial literacy for kids.
Sure. So I called myself a money geek before I knew other people called themselves money geeks. So when I was little, I couldn't learn enough about money. I had all the early jobs, the lemonade stand, the paper route, all those things. So I thought I knew about money. And then when I went off to university, I made a mess of my finances. Like I got the early credit cards, went deep into debt, ruined my credit score, all those things. So once I figured out what I was doing, got back on solid ground, I kind of looked back and I was like, well, how did someone who thought they knew about money make so many money mistakes? And when I reflected on that, I realized it's because I didn't actually know as much as I thought I knew. I knew a little bit about earning. I knew something about saving, but I didn't know anything about investing. I knew nothing about debt, insurance, wealth creation, or any of these other pieces. So it's been my mission since I kind of came to that conclusion that I need to help parents help their kids with money. So that's what I've been advocating, is to help more parents teach their kids more about, more than just go to school, get a good job, earn some money, and then you'll be okay. But give them the full picture and give them some tools and resources and games and exercises and all kinds of things so that when their kids leave home, their kids are fully prepared to actually be, able to make money and do all the other pieces to make sure they're financially well.
Perfect. I look forward to hearing more about some of those tips and tricks. And Maya, thank you for being here. You are a CPA, financial educator, and founder of the Wealthy Kids Investment Club. You also wrote a book, Piggybanks to Stocks, which my 10-year-old loves. It's a book that you can actually read with your child. But tell us a bit more about yourself, Maya, and how you came to be an advocate for personal finance.
So I'm actually a first-generation immigrant. My family immigrated to Canada when I was 15 years old from war-torn Bosnia, and we lost everything in the war. So we had to rebuild our lives. We lived in government shelters, government housing. I had 2 part-time jobs when I was in high school. I was a hustler. And when I became a CPA, I actually met a lot of clients who were making great income, like great living, but they couldn't make ends meet. And I just couldn't understand that, considering my background, where I came from, and how, my family saved money and budgeted. And so I started looking into it more closely. And then I realized that the main issue here was that nobody ever taught these people how to manage their money properly. And at that time, my kids were very young, and I decided that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach my kids how to manage money properly. And then that slowly turned into like teaching other people's kids in the schools. And then when COVID hit, I started my platform on Instagram. It's called teach.kids.money. And that's where I provide free financial advice, or not financial advice, but money management tips for parents, and help them teach kids about money.
Perfect. That's really great. I think there's so much we can all learn. And, when I was in school, there was nothing about financial education. So it's nice to hear that you're going in and spending time there. Um, but I think it is important. And Clifton, maybe you can talk to this a little bit more about how important it is that we start that financial education at home rather than just relying on schools.
Well, if you listen to the story I started with, you could see like the value of learning that at an early age can help prevent making financial mistakes. But I'm grateful that the schools have started to take some of this on. You're right. When I was in school, when you were in school, there was nothing. And now there's a little bit more, but the problem is there's still not enough, right? Like we are still far behind where I think the schools need to be with regards to financial literacy education. And, I get it. Like there's a lot of competing priorities in the education system. So I'm not putting too much blame on the education system. But with that said, it does mean that we need to take more of that onus on ourselves as parents and guardians to ensure that we're teaching our kids, because even when they get this education in school, it doesn't connect, our values. It doesn't connect what we feel about money. So if we prioritize, let's say, giving and donating and tithing, if you're, someone who has a religious background, that might not be reflected in a curriculum. So it's really important that we connect both our values as well as, the hard habits and skills that our kids need to learn.
Yeah, it can bring the real life context to everything that we're learning in schools, and that's really what's going to drive it home. I always heard that schools teach theory, parents teach practice, and it's very true. I do think that parents can often pass down some not so great money habits too, without maybe realizing it. So Maya, walk us through some of these common, I guess, myths or misconceptions that you see parents unintentionally teaching their kids.
Yeah, I think that's, money mindset is actually one thing that's really important for all parents to reflect on and really think about, what did they hear about money when they were growing up? What did they see? What was modeled with respect to money in their childhood? What what their parents did? Because sometimes inadvertently we pass that on to our kids. So oftentimes, I have parents coming to my Wealthy Kids Investment Club and they say that, they grew up thinking that only, especially women, they think that only men invest or only men should be responsible for the financial situation at home, or that only rich people invest, or that you need a lot of money to invest, and all sorts of money mindsets that are not true. And so I usually tell them that, if we think these things, and if we're scared to invest or don't even think about, let's say, investing in this case, we will never attempt to learn ourselves and we will never teach our kids. So we definitely pass it on to future generations.
Yeah, you need to start with us sometimes too. You mentioned that early childhood experiences can impact how we think about money. You guys have some examples of that? Like, what does that actually look like in reality?
I can give an example with my kids. So one of the things I try to really advocate, and we may get into this in a little bit, is just giving our kids chances to practice using money in real life situations. One of the situations that my son found himself in when he was really little, and I remember this very clearly, he had received some money, I can't remember from what, but he wasn't really taking good care of it. Like he was holding it like out in the open, and I knew I could foresee the future. As a parent, we can often tell what's going to come, and I'm like, he's going to lose that. There's no way that money is going to end up in his piggy bank or in his 3 jars, or it's not going to end up being used for anything. He is going to lose it, and lo and behold, he lost it, and there was a lot of tears and a lot of sadness. But previous to that, I had told him many times, you need to keep your money safe, you need to keep it secure. And no matter how many times I said it, he didn't do it. So I had to let him make the mistake of losing that bill. And now he's a lot more cautious with his money. And that's a very small example, and a very, it might seem, like it doesn't matter. But the reason I bring it up is because when you think about what we're doing with kids, is we're giving them opportunities to, practice, make mistakes when the stakes are very low, right? Like him losing a $5 bill when he was, 6 or 7 years old has zero impact on his life long term. other than the skill of remembering that he needs to keep his money safe, he needs to keep it secure, whether that's in a bank account or what have you. He at least now has embedded that message, that knowledge into his everyday. So those small mistakes that they make as young people can have huge dividends when they start to apply the learnings as adults.
You will carry that fear of losing that $5 bill on into the future. Let's talk a little bit about what kids should be learning at different ages. Trust me, I had tried to teach my 3-4-year-old what an ETF was. It didn't go over so well. But how can parents really, or how should we think about tailoring these lessons to different age groups, Maya?
Yes, so that's actually really a great way to kind of segue into this, because we cannot teach obviously 3 or 4 year olds about ETFs. Like, we have to start with little things and build upon that. I even say that when parents have toddlers, we are starting to teach them money skills, and what that is basically just teaching them how to take care of their possessions. So putting those toys away, not ripping them apart. It's more about appreciating and valuing what we have, which eventually with time, it will lead to valuing possessions that we have as adults and spending less money by replacing them. Preschoolers, we can teach them how to share some of their toys, which eventually translates to donating, which is a big part of financial literacy. With junior kindergarten and senior kindergarten, we can teach them the difference between needs and wants. This is such a simple lesson that I find that some adults struggle with, but I've gone to schools and I taught, junior kindergartens this, and they're fully capable of understanding what needs are and what wants are, and, that we need to spend our money on needs first before we spend it on wants. And, just then going into teaching them about coins and bills and practicing the habit of saving money by paying themselves first as soon as they get that allowance or maybe some gifted money.
Okay, sounds good. So they can't start watching ETF Market Insights quite yet, but maybe a little later. Let's talk about the allowance debate. I know how I feel about it, but I want to get your thoughts. Should kids get an allowance? And what should we tie it to? Mine was always tied to chores and cleaning up my room and that type of thing. But what should we tie it to?
As I mentioned a moment ago, I'm huge on giving children opportunities to practice using money, which is why I'm very pro allowance, because it gives your child an opportunity to practice, transacting, saving, donating, and all the rest. I don't love tying it to chores, but I'll preface that by saying, personal finance is personal first. So if you feel strongly like it should be tied to chores, I'd rather you tie it to chores and give them the allowance than, not give them the allowance at all. The reason I don't like tying allowance to chores is because, again, I'm hoping to use the allowance as a means to practice using money. Now, if you do tie it to chores and they don't do the chore, well, now they're not practicing anything. And now you've also found yourself in a bit of a trap in that if they haven't done it and they're not receiving the allowance and they don't want the allowance, they're not doing the chore and they haven't received the allowance, and it's a bit of a trap. So I really advocate for not tying it to chores. But again, I understand that some people feel the need to tie it to chores. And if that's who you are and that's how you feel, I'm all for it. But I really do encourage parents to give children an opportunity to practice using money. And if you have time, I also have options. If an allowance isn't within your budget, there's other ways to also give them access to money, whether that be carving out a bit of your budget, whether that be like your grocery budget. My favorite is back to school budget. So right before you're going to, like, in the beginning of the school year, let your child do the back to school shopping and let them manage the money. Again, giving them the opportunity to practice using money. So an allowance is one tool in the toolkit, but it's not the only one. But I'd love to hear both your and Maya's.
Yeah, let's hear your thoughts, Maya.
Yeah, so allowance is this huge topic. I've seen arguments over it. I definitely have a big opinion on it. So I definitely agree with Clifton, and some of my views overlap with his. I do believe that allowance is a tool. It's a teaching tool. It's not a gift. A lot of times people think, we give our kids money, we're gifting them this. And it's like, no. This money is here for actually teaching them how to manage it while stakes are low and dollar values are low. I really think that there is no one-fit-all approach. And as Clifton said, personal finance is called personal for a reason. I think that we need to tie allowance method to our family values. So what feels right for one family may not necessarily feel right for the other family. There are actually 4 different methods that parents can use when it comes to allowance. So the first one is, as you said, Erin, to tie it to chores. This parents who actually support this method, they actually want to teach their kids work habits and that money doesn't grow on trees. They are parents that completely oppose that approach. They don't want to tie allowance to chores because they believe that kids should be helping with chores because they are part of the family unit and that no one's going to pay them to empty out the dishwasher when they become adults. And so if these kids don't do chores, they still get allowance and get to practice, spending that money or managing it. But the parents will take away the screen time or play dates or something else other than the money. The money stays because they get to learn from it. There's a hybrid approach, which is the mix of the two. So some parents give a certain amount of money regardless of, chores or no chores, but then kids have opportunity to earn some money by doing some chores that maybe parents will pay someone else to do, like car washes, shredding papers, and so on. And the fourth one is no allowance at all. So for those parents who decide that, allowance is not the thing that they want to do, or as Clifton said, maybe they cannot afford to give allowance. I also agree with Clifton. I think that they need to find ways to let kids practice money management. So it would be back to school shopping budget or maybe birthday budget. And that way the kids can have some sense of ownership over that money and learn proper decision making.
If I could just add to that, I totally agree with with what Maya just said. And it isn't a gift. It isn't extra money. It's really the money that you are going to spend on your child anyways. It's just now you're giving them the power, the autonomy, and their ability to manage it on their own. So when folks think about it as extra money, I think that's where it can turn into a bit of an issue or a problem. But when you realize that you just have to find the money that you were going to spend on your child anyways, and then let them manage it, then sometimes it becomes a little bit more palatable for some.
Okay. So there. Is it still putting money in a piggy bank and saving money? We're in this digital world where, people aren't really using cash anymore and it's just tap to pay for everything. So how can we really teach kids, the value of money when we can't see it and feel it?
So I'll jump in here. So for the young ones, for the little ones, I think staying cash based for as long as possible is still the best method. So I'll give an example again from my family. When my son was little, we started with cash and, everything worked really well. Then we moved to an app. Things didn't work so well. So we moved back to cash and things worked better. And now we've moved to a bank account and things are a little bit rocky, but they're getting better. So what I would recommend with regards to, the young ones, stay with cash as long as possible. But once your kids get older and you're ready to start doing something more digital, I would suggest rather than going and opening up, a checking account, open up a checking account and a savings account right away so that they can start mimicking, the systems that you'll have as an adult. So Maya mentioned it earlier, and I'm glad she did, that paying yourself first. So when your child receives, let's say, birthday money or holiday money or what have you, they take some of it, they put it into their savings account, and then they can keep the rest in the checkings account to spend on whatever they might need. And then as they get a little older and they become comfortable with that, then you can potentially open up an investment account so they can invest alongside you and you could advise them and help them understand the importance of wealth creation so that they're, again, mimicking the systems that you hope that they'll be able to continue as they age and get older.
Yeah, I think also just like modeling, I've started in my own purchases to not just tap, sometimes I tap and I don't even look at what's on the screen. So I'll stop when my kids are with me mostly and I'll say, look, it's $14.95. Do you want to press the button? Like, making sure that they understand that I'm not just blindly tapping away, even though I'm guilty of that sometimes. Maya, you've written a lot about teaching kids not just to save, but to invest. And like, how early is too early? I was joking about teaching my 3-year-old about ETFs, but how do you make these investing terms approachable for kids? And when do you start?
You know what? It's never too early. I think it's really important for us to start having these conversations with kids and make them part of everyday discussion. And eventually they catch on. But I would say when they're grade one, they already, know that, we use money in exchange for things. And so they are usually consumers at that point in time. They think like consumers. It's like, oh, I want to spend my money on X, Y, Z. But what if we teach them that they can also be owners of some of the companies whose products and services they use? So sometimes I like to use Apple as an example because a lot of kids have iPads or cell phones or iPods. And so they can, instead of being consumers of Apple products, they can be owners of Apple and own some shares of Apple. And I'm not advocating for Apple as like an investment itself, but there are a lot of other companies that our kids actually know and understand. And so by investing in some of these companies, we can have discussions with them. Let's say if something happens in the news, we can ask them, it's like, hey, this happened in the news. Like, do you think that will help the stock price go up or will it go down? And if, some parents don't have money to invest, they can hypothetically talk about it. And it's like, hey, if we invested in Apple, this is what's happening in the news with Apple right now. Do you think that would make the share price go up or make it go down, and so on? But I think eventually, as they get older, I would definitely teach them to invest in ETFs.
Yeah, for sure. Your book is a great resource for that. And I really do encourage people to pick it up and read it with their kids because it raised a lot of questions for my 10-year-old. I felt like it was a good age.
Thank you.
I think a lot of parents try to be like perfect with their money too and hide all of their mistakes. But Clifton, talk to us about how like sharing and being transparent about some of these missteps is actually probably the best way forward.
I'm so glad you raised this. I think as parents, we have this feeling or this need to, be perfect for our kids. And it's not so much that we need to be perfect for our kids. We just want the best for our kids. So we put that pressure on ourselves. But, that's not a realistic expectation for ourselves. And honestly, and I think you mentioned it here, is that by being open and transparent with some of our money mistakes, we open up so much with regards to the relationship with our child, right? So our children need to know that they're also able to make mistakes. And if they can see and hear from us that we've made mistakes, it humanizes us. And it also helps to strengthen our relationship with them. One of the things I say, especially about talking about money, is that, the more open and transparent and honest we can be about money, about any of these hard subjects that can be as parents to have with our kids, what it really does is it strengthens our relationships. They get to know that we are human, that we're people, that we're fallible, that we make mistakes, and they get to know that they're also able to come to us when they've made a mistake, which is really what we want as parents, right? Like there's so many opportunities or so many times that we hope our kids will come to us and approach us when they have problems or they've made a misstep, but they really need to know that that's open and available to them, and having conversations about, the time we got fired or, the time when we should have paused before we hit that tap button and purchase something. It all just helps, again, to humanize us and make us more approachable to our children.
For sure. All right. Before we wrap up, I do want to hear sort of like a rapid round. What's like one simple, actionable tip that parents can do today to start raising more financially aware kids?
So I would just say start that conversation about money, be open. It's exactly what Clifton just said right now. You know what? A lot of times parents ask me, they're like, oh, can I have a workbook? Can I have a worksheet? Sure. Like I have that. I'm sure Clifton has a lot of that too. But the easiest thing that every parent can do is just use real life examples and talk about them, explain them in a way that your child can understand. Really just using what's happening in everyday life and just involving our kids. And I think that's the best way to teach them.
Find those teachable moments in real life. Clifton?
I definitely should have went first because that's what I was going to say. No, it's because we're so aligned on how we feel about educating children. It really is about using, everyday moments and being open and honest and transparent and having those conversations. Because you're right, all of the talk we had a moment ago about practicing using money and allowances, none of that can come without a conversation. None of that should be without that conversation. So since Maya said that, I will say one of the things that we can do, and I'll dovetail what you were saying. having our children and ourselves pause before we do any purchase, right? And have that moment of reflection. We both have a great friend, David Delisle, who wrote a book called The Golden Quest. And in his book, he mentions, what is your awesome stuff? Taking a moment before you make a purchase just to say, is this my awesome stuff? Just to make sure that you're not mindlessly going through your day, mindlessly spending, just really being conscious and mindful about what you're using your money for, to make sure that you're really using your money to, reach your goals and reflect your values, because it's really about taking that moment, that pause, to make sure that you're getting there. And then, of course, including those conversations, making sure that, on your drive home from school today with your kids, or the walk home, that you're just, you're talking about the moments that they had throughout the day and moments that you had, and just including some of the personal finance pieces in there when you can.
Awesome. Thank you both. Thanks, Clifton and Maya, for being here. I hope you guys can come back again soon. And I think there's, so much we can talk about. I hope our viewers enjoyed it too. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
To learn more about the books and the resources that Clifton and Maya have brought, just check the description below. We're going to have some links there for you. But that's all for today. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of ETF Market Insights. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and sign up for alerts so you never miss our latest content. For more insights and to keep the conversation going, visit us at etfmarketinsights.com. Join our mailing list and explore a wealth of resources and tools designed just for ETF investors. Until next time, stay informed and empowered in your investing journey. This session is for informational purposes only. Any reference to a particular company or product is for illustrative purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy or sell. Particular investment and/or trading strategies should be evaluated relative to the individual's investment objectives, and professional advice should be obtained with respect to your unique circumstances.